CNN senior political commentator Scott Jennings, who, by the way, is also a former George W. Bush White House official, went on an absolutely insane, fact-free tirade against Representative Ilhan Omar. And no one else on the panel did anything about it. In fact, they only added to the pile of garbage. So I'm going to play for you a clip here from this exchange, and then I'll go to breaking this down and some of the reaction online, and just how completely nuts it is that this is still, as of recording this, a CNN contributor, despite the fact that CNN has fired people for a lot less.
Were you surprised to hear her say pretty clearly she would support President Biden in November? Some of her colleagues, I'm not sure they would say that today.
No, she's a Democrat. They're going to vote for Biden. I'm not surprised about that. I am surprised that in the year of our Lord, 2024, there is a public relations agent for Hamas sitting in the United States Congress. The reason Israel is not at that meeting is because Hamas will not provide a list of the living hostages. I didn't hear a word of concern for the hostages. You know, ceasefire, she said, don't happen magically. Well, you know, there was a ceasefire in place on October the 6th. And who broke it on October the 7th?
I'll get to the Ilhan Omar portion of this, which is going to make up most of this video. But let me first just very easily dismantle this garbage that he just said at the end there, that there was a ceasefire on October 6th. Was there? Because the Israeli government was not aware of that. Let's go through, I'm not going to go through it all because there's too many examples. But on the 5th, Israeli forces killed 3 Palestinians in the West Bank. We can keep going. On the 22nd of September, they killed an 18-year-old Palestinian. On the 19th, Palestinians in Gaza protested Israel's inhumane treatment of Palestinian prisoners and attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque. In response, Israel murdered somebody else. The 19th, again, forces killed 5 Palestinians and wounded 30. I mean, we could just go on and on and on and on and on. This is an occupation. The Israeli government controls the West Bank and Gaza. There are separate sets of laws, whether you are Palestinian or Israeli. It is an apartheid regime with a long record of killing Palestinians. And you look at any breakdown, I didn't have this prep, but I've shown this many times. I'm going to bring it up here since I usually have this saved. This will give you an idea of the scale of loss in comparing the two sides here. Death toll in Israeli-Palestinian conflict over the last 15 years. So Palestinian fatalities are in orange, Israeli fatalities are in purple, and I don't even have to say anything else. And this is just 2008. Of course, you can go further back. It's the exact same thing. Just completely fact-free. Of course, he wasn't corrected. He said that there. No one on the panel corrected him. There are 4 other dipshits on that panel. No one said anything. Let's go to focusing on the Ilhan Omar stuff now. So Jeremy Slevin writing here, Islamophobia is not only normalized in American politics, it's rewarded. This is absolutely true. Ilhan Omar, here are her own words on October 7th, saying, I condemn the horrific acts we are seeing unfold today in Israel against children, women, and the elderly, and the unarmed people who are being slaughtered and taken hostage by Hamas. Such senseless violence will only repeat the back and forth cycle we've seen, which we cannot allow to continue. We need to call for a de-escalation and ceasefire. I will keep advocating for peace and justice throughout the Middle East. Yet here you have this clown, Scott Jennings, claiming that Ilhan Omar doesn't care at all about these hostages, didn't say anything, is doing PR for Hamas somehow. Yet here she is condemning Hamas on October 7th. Care, Minnesota here writing, CNN must condemn Scott Jennings' Islamophobic remarks, which fuel attacks on Ilhan Omar and the Muslim community in Minnesota, leading the nation in mosque attacks. It's crucial to reprimand Jennings and apologize for spreading such hate. And on that point, this story is from October, I think mid-October, October 20th. Muslim members of Congress face spikes in death threats. I believe I covered the story at the time because I remember hearing the voicemail and it was just disgusting. But voicemails shared with NBC News include profanity-laced death threats, calling Omar a terrorist Muslim. Another claimed a vigilante group spying on the congresswoman and your children had obtained all your addresses and handed them out to a word I can't say on YouTube. I'm from a militant group, quote unquote, the mail caller of a third voicemail claimed. Quote, I can't wait till our group sees you one day and I can rip your effing rag off your head. I hope the Israelis kill every effing one of you. In a statement, Omar said she and other Muslim Americans have been victims of a dishonest smear that equates criticism of Israel's treatment of Palestinians with support for Hamas, which has created an environment where threats proliferate. And this is exactly what Scott Jennings did on CNN, the most watched news network in the country. And then you wonder why there are spikes in these kinds of attacks. She went on to say at the time, it directly endangered my life and that of my family, as well as subject my staff to traumatic verbal abuse simply for doing their jobs. More importantly, it threatens the millions of American Muslims. This toxic language and imagery has real-world consequences, Omar continued. House Republican leaders stay silent as their party unleashes these toxic attacks and refuse to hold extremists in their ranks accountable. Since assuming office, 2 men have pleaded guilty to threatening to kill me. This is very real. I fear for my children and I have to speak to them about remaining vigilant because you just never know. Waleed Shahid here writing, Scott Jennings is reverting to one of the oldest Islamophobic tropes in the book, which is to allege that Muslim Americans are secretly terrorist sympathizers. People have been fired from CNN for much less. Yes, on that point, Mark Lamont Hill let go from CNN in 2018 over his so-called controversial remarks on Israel, which was simply calling for Palestinians to be able to live freely without having to live under an occupation. In his remarks at that meeting, Hill said, quote, we must advocate and promote nonviolence, added that we cannot endorse a narrow politics of respectability that shames Palestinians for resisting, for refusing to do nothing in the face of state violence and ethnic cleansing. Hill also called for a free Palestine from the river to the sea, which I have. Please don't make me have to explain this again. I have several videos, most recently on Ilhan Omar, on Rashida Tlaib, when she was censured over saying this, which is very quickly here, has been used by human rights advocates for Palestinians forever, does not mean the elimination of Israeli people, simply calls for Palestinians to be able to live freely without having to live under an occupation. And in many cases, discusses or means the ideal scenario, which would be the ability for Israelis and Palestinians to be able to live freely with equal rights under or within a single state. It's not calling for the elimination of people. But he went on to even clarify at the time. Yesterday I gave a speech at the UN in which I critiqued Israel's policies and practice towards Palestinians. It's baffling how people are not responding to the critique, but instead responding to things I didn't actually say. My reference to river to the sea was not a call to destroy anything or anyone. It was a call for justice, both in Israel and in the West Bank and Gaza. The speech very clearly and specifically said those things. No amount of debate will change what I actually said or what I meant. So even though he was clearly calling for what the exact thing that human rights groups like Human Rights Watch, like Amnesty International, like Israel-based human rights group B'Tselem, what they've all been calling forever, which is the ability for Palestinians to be able to live freely. Because even though he was simply calling for that, he was fired from CNN because of the negative connotation that phrase has, which interestingly was used by the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to not mean human rights, but instead he rejected the premise of a Palestinian state and promised that Israel will take over the entire region it currently occupies from the river to the sea. Netanyahu said this phrase to mean domination, to mean we will have full control of this land, and we will do so from the river to the sea. He specifically means the destruction of a Palestinian state, or even not the destruction because one doesn't really exist, the rejection of a Palestinian state. Even though he meant that, this was excused by the White House, completely overlooked by most of media, And this was just recently. He said this. This is January. It is just, it's frustrating to have to feel the need to talk about the same shit all the time, every day, because of the level of propaganda that is spread. Cori Bush, just some reactions here to end on. Cori Bush, representative, writing here, Scott Jennings' comments are reminiscent of the anti-Muslim bigotry we saw in the George Bush post-9/11 era. It is disgusting and must not be normalized. CNN should denounce this hateful, dangerous, and blatant Islamophobia immediately. AOC writing here, how on earth is this kind of blatant Islamophobia so casually accepted without pushback? This is shocking. And Ayanna Presley writing, blatant Islamophobia has no place in our society, let alone on primetime TV. It's dangerous, unacceptable, and cannot be normalized. Got your back, Ilhan Omar. And look, I didn't play the full video because I'm not in the right state of mind to have to reply to more garbage. But it's 3 minutes of absolute shit. You know, usually CNN, like the point of these panels is to have, I'm not defending this, but this is what they normally do, to have different perspectives, even, you know, right or wrong, to have different perspectives on a singular topic. All four idiots, and it's not even loading any other moron on this page right now.
To hear her.
Every other idiot on this panel argues against Ilhan Omar. Just smears her again and again and again. Every single one of them do it. Which shows you that when it comes to this issue in particular, there is no desire to represent the side of human rights, the side of facts. It's simply smear Ilhan Omar for 3.5 minutes and move on. Because this is what they normally do. Now, this is not to defend CNN, but they have had other pieces that have done good work over the weekend. I discussed this in my video yesterday. They had they did a whole segment on how many children have been killed by the right-wing Israeli government since October 7th. And it was a very effective segment. So it's amazing that they can do something like that. The network is aware of reality. And then they have a panel like this of just absolute clowns spreading propaganda.